Whakatakata te hao ki te kuru, whakatanga te hao ki te tonga, kia makina kina te uta, kia mataratara ki tai, ihi aki ana te atakura, i tio, i huka, i hauhu, tihei maori ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwan District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions, so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence, and always be prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwan districts and its communities. Please be seated. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting on the 28th of July 2021. We had called for apologies, and today we have the Mayor for lateness, and we have apology from Grant Miller, Deborah Hassan, and Jeff is joining us via Zoom. Are you there, Jeff? Oh. Have we got him? And not yet. He was there a minute ago. Technology is failing us slightly. I'm sure he'll join. There he is. Hello, Jeff. Can you hear us?
An apology for lateness for Councillor McInnes.
That's what I was just going to say.
Oh, and Councillor McInnes, apology for lateness. I'd like somebody to move those apologies. Thank you. And Alexander, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Identification of any extraordinary general business. Do we have any? Okay, conflicts of interest. I will be vacating the chair for the plan change and asking the Chair of Audit and Risk to chair that portion of the meeting, because I know many of the parties involved in that plan change. We have no public forum today, Chief Executive? Okay. We'll move on to item 6, the confirmation of the minutes. Is anybody happy to confirm the minutes?
So moved.
So moved, Alexander. Seconded, Mugford. All those in favour, please say aye. Any matters arising from those minutes? No matters arising from those minutes? Matters under investigation. On item 7, today we have. What have we got today?
There's a couple here.
There we go. Issue with heavy vehicles, that's coming up in the agenda. So that's coming up later on. Okay, we'll move on to the Chief Executive's report. Over to you, David.
Mr. Acting Mayor, councillors, members of the public, good afternoon. So most of these items on this report are for the information of the community, starting with Three Waters update and the most recent announcement by central government of the availability of $2.5 billion to ensure councils are no worse off, should I say, as a result of the proposed changes. Our share of that sum is $22.3 million, and we will, in the appropriate time, give consideration to how we will utilise that, bearing in mind that we also need to consider stranded overheads as a result of losing that asset group, which, Kelvin will correct me if I'm wrong, but $2.4 million annually that we need to be aware of, as well as transitional costs. We need to continue to analyse information that is coming out of Wellington, keeps coming out, to ensure that our community are no worse off in terms of cost, in terms of access to service, and in terms of quality of service. We also need to be very sure that we protect the welfare of our staff as well. So on the Wellington side of things, there'll be some very significant conversations coming towards the end of September and the early months past that, in terms of finalising legislation for the new entities. Also, that will then lead to appointment of interim CEOs and establishment boards, and start to consider how the processes be put in place as they head towards the transition. So a lot of work still to be done, and there will be a separate report back to council in the next couple of weeks, Mr. Acting Mayor, with the result of the analysis work that we have completed.
I note, Councillor Lemon, is something you want to say?
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. David, I'm assuming as
part of our workshop discussions that we'll have, as you alluded to there, the economic effects on our balance sheet as part of that discussion, so that we've got an understanding of how that affects us rating wise going forward.
Just remind everybody that, we're talking about 40% of our net asset base. So our net asset base is $1.9 billion, and we're talking around $680 million worth of assets. The second item is for the information of the public and is with respect to. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that Three Waters, I think you've nailed it in the paragraph where you say we've yet to be convinced. And that's a message we need to get to our community. They are concerned, certainly there's a portion of our community concerned that we've already agreed to join and that it's a done deal. And I certainly keep stressing to them, no, it's not. We're still waiting for the information and to make that decision. So I think it's really helpful, David, that you have in your report so that we haven't agreed. And I would temper your comments about what we're going to do with the government's $22.4 million they might choose to give us with the comment, if we choose to join, because we've yet to make that decision.
So putting that $22.3 million in context, our annual turnover is around $190 million each year. I'm aware that social media is lit up over the last 24 to 36 hours, and there will be some media statements coming out before the end of the week in terms of what council is up to, which basically are picking up the comments that I've just made. Item number 2 is for the advice of the community about the applications being open for the flood recovery fund of $2.4 million, but be in quick because they close on Friday of this week. The Mayor and I will provide separate information from the local government conference, although suffice to say that the highlight was the Prime Minister's announcement over the future of Three Waters and what was going to be happening there. Also very proud that we got a highly commended for our award entry on the customer service. So you asked us to put in an entry, or we got an entry prepared, put it in, and we got that recognition. So not only recognition of council, but also of those who were involved in the award presentation, preparation, should I say, as well. Item number 4 is again for the information of the community, that the epidemic notice. So this allows us to do what we've done with Councillor Jeff today through to the end of September. So he is formally part of the meeting. Item 5, again for information around expressions of interest from community organisations for future use of Rolleston Community Centre, and a note that those expressions of interest are open until Sunday the 15th of August. An update for information on the Selwan Aquatics Centre, and if you haven't been down there, please do take the opportunity to go down and have a look. Another fine example of a project well managed and completed within the time frame that we expected. And finally, Mr. Acting Mayor, some alterations to the delegations menu as a result of new staff coming on board.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Welcome, Councillor McInnes. David, the time frame for the flood funding is very short. We have put this out to our media people as well.
Yes, so this has actually been out about 3 weeks at least, Stephen. At least 3 weeks this has been out, if not 4 weeks. No, the flood recovery fund, the $4 million, the central government one.
Yeah.
It's been out for
just wondering if we can get a reminder on some form of media, just to those who may not have yet had time to put something in. Thank you. Can I have a mover and seconder for the Chief Executive's report? Oh, Councillor Epihar, you have something you wish to say?
Happy to so move. Tēnā tātou. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just a question for our CEO. David, I just wanted to reiterate under the 0.13 Waters update that public consultation will be in the 4th quarter at this stage?
No, that apparently is not going to be the case now. So central government want information back from councils. Initially they said within 8 weeks. That is now likely extended through to the 30th of September. And the supplementary comments were that that will probably negate the requirement for consultation. So that's one of those feedback pieces that we will be considering, and really in light of the likes of comments on social media as to exactly what the impact will be. But rest assured, we've got a team of people working through effects fairly solidly at the moment.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Epihara has moved the Chief Executive's report. Do I have a second? Councillor Gallagher. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, just before we continue, Councillor Bland, can you hear us at all? Just checking to see that Councillor Bland.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you very well now. Can you hear me okay?
We've got you loud and clear. Thank you, Councillor Bland.
Thank you very much. Yep.
I hope you get well soon, and we look forward to your input during the afternoon, should you wish to.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item 9, the heavy vehicle restrictions.
So move.
Mark Chamberlain, is there any conversation around this?
I'd like to propose as mover an additional clause be added that council continues to investigate similar options for Lincoln and Prebbleton, I think, or something along those lines. I've just passed the words to the secretaries because I think what we're proposing for Tennyson Street is eminently sensible and appropriate, and over time there may be appropriate options for Lincoln and Prebbleton, but at the moment there's no clear and obvious, certainly in my mind, heavy vehicle bypass options for either of those two townships. But I think we should still have it in our minds and where possible to continue to look at it, because they are similarly affected by heavy traffic through their main streets. So I think it would reflect that we haven't forgotten them, that we'll continue to look at it as and when it's appropriate. So I'll also move that those two recommendations.
Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that with the
Councillor
amendment.
Lemon's happy to second that. Councillor Epihara.
Kia ora, thank you, Mark, for the report. Just commend the council for taking this action, and we heard loud and clear in the long-term plan a number of significant safety issues. So again, commendation there. I'm just interested in the timing of it, and will it be introduced, and perhaps I might have missed that, so apologies if I have, in time so that the upgrade of the roundabout on Shands is completed before we do then start to divert the heavy traffic away through that area.
Your comment, Mr. Chamberlain.
Well, there is no restrictions proposed for Springs Road, so it's only Tennyson Street is anyone proposed to have on there. So I'll just make the comment, Tennyson Street lends itself to a restriction now because of what's been developed there, and it makes it a bit more difficult for heavy vehicles to take that route. And I think by choice they should not go that way, even without a restriction, if it was me driving a truck and trailer unit. But I think Councillor Alexander sort of including that in there, I think if we have upgrades in Lincoln Town Centre when that proceeds, it needs that infrastructure upgraded and changed with raised platforms, all that thing, to make it less desirable for heavy vehicles to go through there, if that's what we want, and to slow them down. So just putting up a sign saying restriction probably isn't as much of a deterrent as building the infrastructure to actually make it a less favourable route before they even get anywhere near Prebbleton or anywhere near Lincoln. Because once they get there, there aren't very good routes to get around Springs Road or Gerald Street. So that's sort of the point of in the report. So it was that side of things. So there's no, obviously the roundabouts at Shands Blakes and Springs Masters will help the flow of traffic around that area, but that's to get to the motorway and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done before we look at a restriction through there, I think. So
Thank you.
That was just my view anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. I concur as a local resident with your view on that one. Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I was going to say as mover that the only other recommendation I would make would be if we were to look at signage for this, perhaps alongside our dog exercise area on Sprinson Ralston Road, there could be some signage that northbound traffic there gets directed, traffic heading up towards the town centre. If you're going south, not needing to be in the town centre, you take the left turn onto Lowe's Road, Duns Crossing Road, and if you're heading north to Levi Road to the Whedons Interchange, because there's no particular need for heavy traffic to even go that one block further to Ralston Drive, because it's, if they're not delivering to the town centre, they ought not to be there. And the further we can direct them away from our town centre, the better. But I really am pleased Mark, that we've got this report and this recommendation in front of us. I think it's a great step. I have discussed this with people in Rolleston since it got onto the council agenda, and not one person has opposed it. In fact, most people's reaction when you tell them what we're proposing to do is, what a great idea. Why haven't you done it earlier?
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Levin.
Yeah, thanks. Not wanting to steal Councillor Mark's thunder here, and he should really have the last right of reply. So I'll let him at the end. I'm sure he'll indulge me. Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the report. I think it's a great step forward, and I just think it's an opportunity with the amendment for us to now perhaps workshop that, and that'll inform future annual and long-term plans, Mark. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder, being Alexander and Lemon. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Now we're going to move on to Plan Change 68. And I'm going to ask the Chair of Audit and Risk to take the chair, as I tend to step back from this conversation.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. We have before us the report on the Plan Change 68 for Prevalent. Decision how to consider the private plan change request. So, Jess, you're going to speak to that. You want to speak to that first before we ask for a mover and seconder?
Say a word or two.
Yeah, just a quick summation. Yeah.
So this assessment has been provided to assist council to make a decision on the process for the requested plan change, which seeks to rezone approximately 67.5 hectares on the northwest side of Prevalton from rural inner plains to Living Z, and it would result in approximately 820 residential sites. The recommended option is to accept Plan Change 68 for notification, as this will enable the zoning request to be publicly notified, with the community being able to lodge submissions and further submissions, following which the substantive merits about the proposal can be considered at a public hearing. Any questions?
That seems fairly clear. Jess, are there any questions to that proposal before I ask for a seconder and first mover and seconder? So moved, Shane. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Bob? Further? No further questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Hand back to you, Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lemon. Right, now where are we on to? We're on to the Transportation Monthly Update, item 11.
It's just that loose connection.
Yes, Mark.
Tēnā koutou, I think. Andrew's not here, so I'll just go through my bit.
Thank you. Yes.
Might be able to take his bit as read, but and again, I was having most of mine taken as read as well. There's not a lot of changes there. It's start of a new financial year, so more money to spend on maintenance for a few months anyway. But just one thing I was going to come, speed limits is on there. It's been a recurring one, and they were approved for consultation some time ago, but due to some action on my behalf, and also working with other staff who have had other things to work, who are helping me with getting it together. We're not quite there yet, but it should be the next day or so. I'll just go over the GIS stuff. Apart from that, I haven't got too much else to add to the report. Most of it can be taken as reads. And I can't respond to the stuff in Andrew's section, but if you've got a question.
Yes, I have Councillor Lemon and Councillor Eberhard and Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. It's really just perhaps noting that I think there's a chance to have future discussion around how we fund that undergrounding fund. As is noted in there, there's pressure, obviously, because of it relying on interest from that amount of money inputted and relying on that being invested. I think also note there too that my understanding of the purpose of that account is to enable perhaps lower growth townships and areas and as we've recommended here in Glen Tunnel, to be have access to funds that wouldn't necessarily be available to the larger growth areas through DCs and other changes. So I just want to ensure that we keep that in the back of mind. It's an opportunity to assist some of our smaller townships and areas via that fund to achieve an outcome. And I'm thinking particularly of the undergrounding that took place in Southbridge a couple of years ago, Mark. It's a very useful fund we tend to forget it's there actually, as much as anything. So I think we, as governors, we've got to keep that in the back of our head when we're having conversations with our community too. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Epiha.
Kia ora, Mark. Thank you very much for the report. Just under council request, and I probably didn't request it, but we've had some correspondence, and I've had correspondence through from some of our constituents around the intersection of Lake Road, Leaston Road, some safety issues there. We had correspondence around that, and I wonder just whether you've managed to conduct the safe system assessment that you'd previously spoken about yet on that intersection, please.
Yes, we have been there just writing it up along with the Leaston Road, Goulds Road intersection. We did that the same day as well. So just look at, we've got an option on how we can actually improve things there based on the previous conversations, mainly to improving road marking in that intersection to provide a right turn bay and things like that for both directions, and maybe some split islands. But once we've tidied up in discussion with Jessica and a couple of others, I'll send it through. So yeah.
Good on, Mark. Thank you very much. I'll make sure to pass that on. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander, then Councillor McVeigh.
First would be to respond to Councillor Lehman's comment. The undergrounding fund was for areas of townships that weren't having developments. It could have been the older areas of existing townships, such as Moore Street, Brookside Road, and Ralston, and the piece on Lincoln Ralston Road that's missed out between developments. So it wasn't exclusively the smaller townships, though it has the ability, as you said, to help those potentially more than the larger ones. And I really, now that Andrew has arrived, my question was, and he perhaps can address it when he speaks to his part of the report, was around the NZ Up projects. Is council going to make a submission on the NZ Up consultation that's currently happening, given the strong level of community angst about some details, particularly pertaining to the flyover? Will council be making a submission reflecting some of that community concern?
Okay, we'll deal with that when Mr. Maisie has a chance to speak to his report. Councillor McVeigh first.
One is on the legalisation of the roads at Colgate. There seems to be a lot of confusion in the community. There was a committee meeting last night of the township, and they're on the understanding that land's for sale and all sorts of things. Would it be possible to send something out and say that where we've got, and if anyone was interested in used to for using the land, that they can get in touch with council just so it clears the matter up. And the other thing is, if Glen Tunnel was going to get the second part of their undergrounding done, when would that decision be made and when would it go ahead?
Thank you. Councillor Epiha, are your questions gone?
Well, it was actually to do with the same type of thing, funding,
Okay, well,
that underground
I
funding.
think we'll let Mr. Maisie speak to his report and then see what rolls out of that. Thank you. The floor is yours, Andrew. Perhaps that's so. You had a tandem bicycle, I believe. Perhaps you'd like to use your microphone.
All right, I think I've got myself sufficiently organised now. Thank you very much. So just going quickly through some of the main items there. We're still waiting for the Transport Agency to release the details on our improvement program. So at the moment, that's indicated towards the end of August from what I heard the other day. So we all wait with bated breath on that. I think we also know our situation with the plan change requests and the fast tracking of plan change 64, that's the Farrington development, and we've been putting quite a bit of work into getting all that evidence lined up for submission to the hearing panel on all the various aspects, including transportation. Obviously, the big item in the news at the moment is the consultation by the Transport Agency on the Rolleston NZ Up project. And so, as you know, that is out there at the moment. There's been a number of community events that have been held. There was also a meeting in conjunction with the Rolleston Residents Association the other night, which was well attended, and so I had some good questions and comments come out of that. Obviously, there's some concerns by the community, and it's got to remind everybody that the process is at the moment that the agency is seeking feedback on the general concepts that they've put out there. The whole point of this consultation and engagement is to get feedback from the community to understand where there may be issues and things that need to be looked at further in terms of how this is all brought to bear. So it's not the end all of it all. It's basically the start of the whole process, which will then these comments will then get fed into the more detailed optioneering that is going on at the moment. And so, for instance, as an example, emergency services may be raising a concern about how access can be provided still to the highway. It'll be up to the agency to take those comments away and look at that in more detail and understand what the situation, and then report back on all those aspects. So there's quite a bit more of the process has to go through the motions until we get to that point, but it is a point that they will be working towards. In relation to Councillor Alexander's comment about will council be making a submission, the indications by the Mayor, discussions with him a few days ago, yes, it is his expectation that we are, and I think it's only appropriate in terms of referencing some of the concerns that have been raised by the community. Certainly, as part of the project team, I've been taking those concerns back directly to the team, and they have all those sort of written down and lined up. But of course, we need to make sure that the council's there on behalf of its ratepayers in Rolleston, making sure that the comments that have got concern to you are appropriately represented with the agency. So that would be, without sort of going into all the detail of the whole thing at the moment, is it okay to leave that one there?
Certainly is, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So other things that have been tracking along, the work continues with the West Melton State Highway 73 signals project, and the agency consultants, project consultants, have met with our water services team to start looking at some of that, those services that need to be rearranged underneath there. As you know, there's a big water race and various things with sewers and water mains and things like that, which are actually quite tricky to get dialed in, and they need to understand what they need to do in that regard. One of the comments that sort of comes through quite regularly is, why is there such a delay on this project? One of the things is that you've got to remember that they have to go through a land acquisition process for the realignment of West Melton Road onto Whedon's Ross Road. And so as you know, as we all know, with our own big projects like that, those sort of aspects can take some time. So they have to work through that. But as I understand it, the process is on train, and it should hopefully pop out okay at the other end, but it just takes time. Greater Christchurch Partnership, I think, as you probably all may be aware, the MRT interim report was reported to the Greater Christchurch Committee. They seem to be quite happy with that, but as referenced in the report, a few further things that need to be done with it in terms of it needs to input into the spatial plan. We need to refine some aspects of the feasibility assessment, and also look a little bit further into the corridor assessment as well. The other aspect that the committee was very keen on is to understand what we could do to accelerate some of our PT responses within our normal sort of business as usual, but hinging around PT futures, and how that may need to be factored in going forward as well, in terms of if we don't get everything, if you want to put it that way, that we're asking for through the MRT process. Moving on to councillor requests, we've had no response from the agency on our state highway review letter that we sent in, so see what happens with that. We might have to follow up on that and see if we can get a response, but I think it's sort of in that position in the agency at the moment that they don't quite know themselves the answer. Street lighting upgrade, Councillor Alexander, we're underway with the design of those two arterial roads. I provided in there the spreadsheet from the power undergrounding funding account, so you'll be able to see those projects that has been funded previously, as we talked about. You wanted to see that detailed through the LTP deliberations. And just following on from Councillor Mugford's comment before, well, essentially what I've said in there, that for the Glen Tunnel, that if you agree, we can utilise that funding to take that forward and get that completed in terms of our first current identifiable priority, as I put in the report. So if you're happy with that, we can advance the design work on that and get an estimated cost, and then bring it back to the council for approval.
I think you've got approval from the council on that one.
Okay, good, thank you, we'll take that. And the other thing was in terms of, I also added into the report the transport emissions submission to the MOT that was referenced by councillors at the last meeting, just so you've got it there for your information.
Yes, that was also mentioned in the Chief Executive's report.
Okay. So that pretty much wraps me up, unless you've got any other questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Maisie. Yes, the undergrounding, we did have some conversation before we arrived about the undergrounding fund and the fact that the interest bearing on it was quite low. When I look around the older parts of the township I live in and I see the insulation dripping off cables, I think about that fund as well and how little it is, and how much money it will take to do the older parts of our older established communities in Leaston and Lincoln and Prebbleton. So it's something we can look to in the future as to finding a magic wand to get some more money. On that note, thank you, Mr. Maisie. Any questions? Councillor Ipiha.
Kia ora, Andrew, thank you very much for your report. Like Malky has just said, some of the older parts of our district, and one of those older parts is actually little Rakaia huts. They come to me quite a number of occasions and asked me for an upgrade on the street lighting around near the boat ramp. I know we have a light there at the moment. What's the likelihood of that happening? Is there a possibility we can upgrade that so it provides a bit of a safer lighting for those residents there? And can any of the power underground funding be used to enable that?
I think I'd probably we'd have to have a chat with Douglas Marshall on that in terms of if there's lighting for that public boat ramp facility. Okay.
He seems to be very receptive.
Yeah. But certainly, if there's ability to combine in terms of making things better for lighting in association with that public facility and any other roading aspects around that area, we can certainly have a look at it on a collective basis.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, just said I had been in touch with the residents that association have asked for it and have informed that they're normally funded out of low cost road risk, but it is competing with intersections with arterial roads and collected roads rather than at the end of a road with lower traffic volumes and things like that. So it is competing with other projects that probably have more of a need. So they're aware of that, but they do send an email on a regular basis.
Yeah, just understand that we do have international events that happen out there as well. It is parked way out, on the edge of our district, but it is actually quite widely used by, a lot of the country actually.
Thank you. Councillor McInnes.
Kia ora, gentlemen. Thank you for your excellent chauffeur services. I just wanted to say, as you've mentioned before, you came to a Royalston Residents Association meeting on Monday night. Just wanted everyone to know Andrew did a fantastic job. There were some very passionate people in the room with some very pointed questions, and he took a very calm and knowledgeable approach to responding to everybody. And and not everybody was necessarily quite as passionate, so it'll be very interesting to see where the feedback falls. But the meeting went pretty well under the circumstances. So there you go. Thank you.
Excellent. Bouquet received. Councillor Makeford.
Yeah. Has anything else happened at Castle Hill with the lighting? Have we had any more problems recently? Do you know?
Okay. Yes. I'll let Mark answer that.
Well, yeah, there's been the ongoing damage to the street lights, things in terms of blacking them out and that sort of thing. So we are just working on a bit of a plan on how we can actually deal with that and inform locals saying we shouldn't be doing it. So, yeah.
And through you, Mr. Acting Mayor Bob, that also includes notification for the police as well, so that they're aware of what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay, there being no more conversation, would somebody like to move the council receives a report for information? I have a mover and a second, please. Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Makeford. All those in favour, you say aye. Carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input this afternoon. We'll now move on to the property transaction updates and call Douglas to the front.
The first item on the report is the Aquatics Centre extension. I'll probably just work through them one by one and allow questions to be raised. I've got nothing extra to add to that apart from obviously we're into the sort of that final project being the refurbishment of the existing pool. Tiara Tia, commentary there as is. Number of us were on site late last week. There's about 70 staff working on that site from various contractors and subcontractors at the moment. Also including the Century Garden installation around the outside. So a lot of activity on site there. Tourism Infrastructure Fund. I think you've all picked up we've been successful with round 5 for those projects. So it's good news. Just get on now with getting in line for ordering the toilets we need for each of those projects. Leaston Medical Centre. So we're just obviously conscious of the need to make sure that our feasibility and financial business cases, obviously, we report to you as to what option to select. So we're just doing a bit of a review of that at the moment. No doubt it's quite tricky at the moment in the market for builds with, well reported with shortages of materials and supplies and trying to get accurate costings. So that work's due back to us as staff either next week or early the following week. So as soon as we've got something we can report as the next steps forward, we'll come back to council on that project. Met with representative from Go Haurata yesterday. Had a good discussion on what issues each party needs to move forward. A lot of our issues are around the reserve master plan, allowing our spatial planning to occur. Particularly a key point on that reserve now is the fact that the Scout domain building is no longer used by Scouts. That could be a better site possibly for the new community centre to be based on. There's also a need obviously from the Haurata Community Trust and Go Haurata to work out how their funding side of things works, and then we can get both together and I can report back to you on how governance and delivery of the project will work going forward. So we're aiming to have that number piece of work completed before Christmas. Earthquake prone buildings, we've got work on Mead in the LTP. Tauera, we're just doing a wee bit of work on. There's an issue with fire occupancy. We're just making sure. We've had that on the books for a couple of months. We're just waiting for a report to come from a fire engine on that. The Kiwi Pavilion one, we'll probably move that into our work program. It's not down to be done in the next 3 years. It's not life-threatening work. It just needs to be dealt with at some stage. So, but I'll probably move that off these reports because it'll just need to go into our work program. West Melbourne Community Park, statements there, no update there. Similar to the Reeds Pit there, we're looking probably to do some limited opening, well not limited opening, but opening the pit, the new pit there in the spring. The tricky bit will be we just won't have all our linkages quite as good as we might like them as they'll be in the long term, but also we're keen to get people involved in that recreational asset. Nothing further to add on the Prebbleton pump track notes. Prebbleton Park, when we're out there with tender documents, so we're waiting for that. There'll be some contracts coming back probably to you in mid-late August for contract acceptance, if that's possible, for awarding of that first stage of tender. The relicensing project, nothing further to add to what we've got in there. And just a comment about our fleet, and then a suggestion of a couple of recommendations that you might like to put formally as we discussed at the last meeting, which didn't seem to get minuted. So in terms of that report, happy to take any further questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. Just a couple of procedural things asked on Monday night about continued use of the rifle range there in the park. I'm assuming they can continue to use in the interim. That was the advice I gave them because there wasn't anything to the contrary. It'll just be limited to numbers, I'd imagine, which is not great in relationship to that. The second thing is, it's too late for this round of TIF funding, but just since you've now been landed with consultation on the street lighting down at the end of Little Rakai Huts. Maybe future TIF funding might be useful.
It's funny, I mean, just related to that, it was surprising and interesting to see how many boat ramps were meeting TIF funding under other councils' applications. So not necessarily this boat ramp, but obviously we might look at that. But I know at Coleridge, often there's people, and there are other spots now and again, people show interest. So there might be something we can look at for next time around.
Yes, boat ramps do need lighting. Councillor Epiha.
Thank you, Douglas, for your report. At least the medical centre. Just hoping that the report will take into account the 50% growth in the next 5 years. Understanding the message that you've written here. Just getting your thoughts on the report coming back with that growth intended.
I think the key for any buildings we build is the ability to extend them. So that's obviously being able to show and demonstrate where that additional stages would occur. You wouldn't, I don't think your a tenant wouldn't be able to afford to fund 5 years growth. And
yes,
there's still a lot of work to do in terms of delivering on that from a number of angles, as we all know anyway.
Thank you.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. On your last comments around the vehicle fleet composition, the date of 30th of June 2026, is that based on a 5-year average vehicle sort of use by council? How did that date be arrived at?
Yeah, provided a report showing what fleet was being renewed over the next 5 years in terms of numbers and value. That's the reason for June 2026. If you felt as council a different date would be more appropriate, then you have that discussion.
I personally would probably prefer it to be something a little more aspirational, 30th June 2025 or something. I'm happy with 2026. If understanding that is, a 5-year fleet life is kind of not an unusual expectation for our fleet. So I was just checking that that's what it was for, and I'm happy to move those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations before us today? Councillor Lemon. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? I declare them carried. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your report. Well, that brings us to the end of the non-public excluded part of the meeting. So we will break at this stage for a quick cup of tea. So we'll have a mover and a seconder to go into exclude the public, Councillor Lemon and Councillor Alexander. And we'll be back at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
Right, sorry.